Morning. Okay, I'm going to be starting to introduce this is successor. I call him Pico the Gallo. Anyway, I'm going to be starting to introduce him into bridleless riding. And what we're doing here with him, we took part of the rein, hooked it to itself, and made a loop around his neck. The other rein is attached to his left bit. In this case, it could be either bit, and that is just to kind of complete a decision when I start to ask him for these turns and so forth. So let's see if he can come over here. Good boy. So when I mount him, the first thing I do when I get on him is nothing, because I don't want him to feel like when I get on he's supposed to do something. So I'll sit here for a moment. Okay. So as I pick up this line and touch his neck, when I bring that touching his neck, and that's all we're doing is touching, there's no pressure involved in this. When I go to the left, as the rein contacts his neck, he slightly feels my calf on my right leg touching. And of course it disappears. Now we're going to go the opposite direction. And he'll feel the left calf touch him barely to kind of complete that turn. When I ask him for a stop, I'm going to lighten my seat, then sit down, contact his neck, and then ask for the backup from the neck. So we're going to be repeating this over and over again. I want to emphasize that the purpose for my purpose for bridleless riding is to improve the horse. It's not to show him off or try to get to some kind of a demonstration. But when we start to get into bridleless riding, the basic seat commands and leg commands are the only thing that are influencing the horse. So the horse now starts to think differently. He's not thinking so much about his mouth, and he's thinking more about the rider's seat and so forth. So right here, if his head starts to go the opposite direction, my leg will come slowly and touch him on the right side. And if he needs assistance, I'll just slightly pick up this direct rein to bring him over with. So we're going to go travel around here and just do some different things. And after I feel like he's getting pretty comfortable with this, I'm going to slip the bridle off of him completely and just go with the string around his neck and see how he does. These kind of lessons have nothing to do with control. I'm not trying to steer the horse and make him go someplace. I want him to feel the influence of a decision to turn one direction or the other, but I'm not trying to make him turn and make him turn and make him turn. That'll come later. Right now we just want to influence a decision. Another thing too, if I make a turn, let's say to the left, let me lengthen this up a little bit here. When I make a turn to the left, I'm going to use my shoulder to turn so that my hand will find his neck. Instead of just putting my hand on there, I want my shoulder to do this because it affects my lower torso, kind of completes things a little bit. So I touch him here, leg is touching him, then it releases. Turn the shoulder to find his neck. There, and right here, when I realize there his head went straight, he had a little bit off center that time. And I want to be cautious as well of overweighting either of my stirrups. I want to try to keep the stirrups as neutral as I can keep them, so I'm not adding more pressure on one than the other. That has a tendency to kind of throw the horse off. So I'm just going to travel around here and do some impulsion work and some influence for decisions here. I'm going to be touching his neck. Now my leg has found him, and my fingertips are touching him. Every time, in this case, every time that right shoulder steps over, the rein and my leg disappear. So it's kind of a timing thing. Touch him here, right shoulder moves over, it releases, releases, releases. I'll go the other direction. There, releases, releases, releases. So basically what I'm looking for is when I'm going to touch him with the rein, I'm looking at his shoulder. When the shoulder is on the ground, that's when I'm going to touch him. Remember, not the shoulder, when the foot is on the ground in the back position, that's when I'm going to touch him. That means that when his foot comes forward, the rein disappears. And a boy. And a boy. Okay, now we're going to follow, go to the left. I'm going to follow down into a hindquarter pivot, working till his circle gets small enough that he stops his back feet and steps his front feet through. And to help him with this inside rein. Going to the left is a challenge for him. Here he comes. Want that foot to step over. And now we walk out of it. Attaboy. Same thing on the other side. Now on the right side, he's a little bit more comfortable going to the right. So I'm not using a direct rein on the right. I'm just to see if I can find these decisions. There, attaboy. From just using that direction with the loop rein on him. Okay, now he's answered several bits of softness in his decision, and that's what we're looking for, is a soft decision. Now we're just going to let him travel for a while and not ask anything of him. Now when I'm riding and when I'm doing these kind of things, I want to set up so that he eventually has an understanding of what the stop feels like. And there's two stops. One is verbal, and there's no contact with the bit or anything when you use the verbal. And the other is transitional, which has to do with the seat. So if I want to stop him, I'm going to slowly push my feet forward, and then I'll squeeze with my knees and see if I can get a back up. If nothing happens, I'm going to assist him a little bit. I want at least a half a step backwards after every stop. So that's the transitional. As I push on my stirrups, it changes obviously the seat pressure. And so it's a slow thing. It's not jammed on him. And then now we use the verbal, and the verbal, teaching the verbal, as he gets to moving, my calves, just in a feather touch, stay in contact with him all the time. So they're almost like they're in rhythm with his gait or whatever. And when I get ready for the stop, I'm just going to stop riding. In other words, let my legs leave him and say, whoa, with no assistance to the bridle or anything. So the incentive for this, the verbal command, is how much work he's doing. So I'm going to push him up a little bit into some gaiting. And he can choose wherever he wants to go. I don't care where he goes. Okay, and in just a few moments here, I'm going to just use the verbal on him, and the verbal will almost be at a whisper. Oh, good boy. So when the bit is in him, when we're working with the bit on him, if I use the word whoa for him, I don't want to have any contact on him. I don't want to say whoa. I want him to learn that, in fact, in teaching it this way, what happens to the horse is that with the contact, in other words, the rider is always riding, is promoting just a rhythm of impulsion. And then when the rider stops riding, it's pretty evident to the horse because the legs disappear, everything kind of drops down, and the rider says, whoa. And so this is something that then eventually the word whoa starts to become something that the horse is looking forward to. It's almost something that's feels good to him instead of saying whoa and making him stop. So we want to try to keep those two separate, and this has to do with whether you have a bridle on him or not, but it is certainly part of the sensitivity of his bridleless riding. Now when my left leg is touching him, it's also in the rhythm of his step. I'm not just putting it and pushing on him at all. So when my rein releases, my leg releases. And a boy. Good boy. Good boy. Good boy. When his bridleless riding is in a, it's well understood and so forth, there won't be a string on his neck. It'll just be the fingertips of the rider and the rider's legs and seat that'll guide him. I think this is a good lesson for anybody to practice with their horse, because I think one of the things that gets in the way when people are riding their horses is that they almost become obsessed with control. And I think that's a place where we need to not be so obsessed with control and think more about the subtleties of communication. So it can put a rider in a little bit of a out of the comfort zone feeling, because they become kind of gathered up by this whole control thing. And when they feel like, oh my gosh, I don't have control of my horse, it changes everything about the way they ride. Oh, good boy. Okay, we'll see how he does here by taking the bridle off of him. Hey, bud. Yeah, boy. Good boy. As in any of the lessons that are taught, doesn't matter if it's bridleless or anything else, we try to exaggerate when we're first teaching the lessons, is that the commands come to the horse in slow motion, really, really slow. So that the purpose of that is they get to where they can feel what our intentions are, and when we start riding in a normal way with them, they can then identify what our language feels like when we're riding him. I think when we slow things up intentionally, you become very deliberate, and our habits are to pick the reins up and be kind of spontaneous in the things that we're asking of the horse. But if we get a little bit more slower, and there's a kind of a comment that you hear a lot, at least people that I run into that are training, is that the slower that you ask, the lighter the horse becomes, more responsive, because they have a chance to understand exactly what it is that you're asking them to do. For them to process everything instantly takes some time, because a lot of the information that we give the horse seems to have would overlap. One thing almost looks like the other. So for that discernment, if we practice our lessons bringing something to the horse very slowly, they can feel the setup for that decision. And then initially, obviously, we're asking for him to make just a decision, not to spin around or anything like that. So we just want him to understand what it feels like to find his way into a request. And that has a lot to do with everything that we're teaching, is that we want the horse to find the answer, not be shown the answer. In other words, making him do something, but we want him to discover the answer. Now, what I do on the backup, which will be when he's seasoned on this lesson, these kind of lessons, is that my knees will press on him, and that as my knees start to compress, that will be eventually his command to back up. And of course, they release every time he moves his feet back. Sometimes you'll see people in the back, in the bridleless, and they'll put their legs forward and kind of fan the horse. There's nothing wrong with that, but if you can do something with the horse and teaching in a more subtle way, where you're not telegraphing all of this stuff, I think it ends up being a nice relationship between the rider and the horse, so everything looks quiet. Hopefully whomever might be watching can't exactly tell what's being done to get that to happen. Now, one of the things on this using your legs to back the horse up sort of thing, what I try to get clear to the horse is when my knees come in, that's his command to back up. But when I bend my knees and my calves come back behind the cinch, that's his command to go forward. So we want to try to make a clarity there so that there's, he understands there's a place that goes forward and a place that goes backwards. And a boy. I'm going to push him up a little bit and let him travel a little bit. Boy. Who? So I said whoa 3 or 4 times there, and at the last time I didn't say whoa until after his feet stopped, and then say whoa and reward him. So he can just kind of associate that, because he has a ways to go yet before that word is just almost, some of these horses, when we do these lessons, will pick this up, and the word whoa is almost like a sliding stop. He's not that way, but I'm emphasizing that this line on his neck is not being added pressure to. It's just there, and the combination of the rider's legs, and the fingertips and so forth, he finds his way. So we don't want to, because he's learning this, so if I start adding a lot of pressure on this, the horse will then just start thinking about the pressure. They will not connect the dots as to what that pressure means. And I really feel strongly about that we don't want to start using pressure to teach something. Pressure should, the teaching should be coming from contact, and I use pressure to block a wrong choice. And a boy. Good boy. So we're going to call this a lesson. He did pretty well, I think. This was his second time without the bridle on his head, and I thought he did really well. So we'll call this a lesson and do some more later.